Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Return to Work webinar. We're going to get started here shortly. We're just going to give it another minute as people kind of join the meeting. So thank you for being here. So as people are getting settled in, we just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, thank you for providing your questions and concerns about reopening when you registered for today. We'll address many of those items in our presentation, but also encourage you to ask any additional questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature. We'll be posting a few links in the chat area, but our panelists will not be monitoring this for the questions, so make sure to use that Q&A section. We are recording today's session, and we'll be sending out that recording to all attendees, as well as posting it on our COVID-19 resource page on our website. So with that, we will get things going, and I'm gonna hand it over to Nick Sullivan.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Nick Sullivan. I'm the Risk Management Director here at Morris Garritano. The COVID-19 crisis has completely transformed the way we work and interact with each other and is going to continue to challenge us in new and unprecedented ways. As business is eager to get back to work, the road to a healthy economy will not happen overnight, and it's going to really be contingent upon the health and safety of our communities. Alleviating any anxiety or fear that employees and consumers may have will be paramount to a successful reopening. Public sentiment backs this up. A recent survey from Edelman, a PR firm best known for their annual trust barometer, revealed that 78% of the public believe that businesses have a responsibility to ensure their employees are protected from the virus and must prevent its spread in the community. Yet, only 42% believe businesses are actually prepared to do so. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide you with some clarity and actionable next steps as you plan your return. We will present an overview of human resource considerations, workplace safety guidelines, and in light of Governor Newsom's recent executive order, we will discuss the COVID-19 implications on workers' compensation and liability to your customers. I'd like to remind you that we will not be advising on any specific state or local phased reopening guidelines. We strongly encourage you to stay on top of those announcements, as those will ultimately determine when and under what considerations you may return to work. Please note, we're not licensed legal professionals. You will continue to have very difficult business decisions to make, all with numerous legal implications. We highly advise you review your return to work plans with a trusted legal advisor. Now, if we look to our agenda, we're thrilled to provide you with a panel of Morris Garritano experts that will be going over each of these elements before we jump into a live Q&A session. Now, we did receive over 200 questions and concerns during registration and have done our best to integrate those common themes into this presentation. But if you have a very unique situation or if your specific question was not addressed, I encourage you to reach out to our experts offline. So without further ado, we will start off with HR business consultant Louise Matheny. Take it away, Louise.
Thank you, Nick, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you again. So let's talk about what steps you should take to prepare to reopen. Preparation and communication are going to be of utmost importance, as this COVID crisis has caused a lot of anxiety and stress. Having a thorough plan in place to establish a safe and healthy workplace and sharing that plan provides peace of mind for your employees and their families. There will not be a single one-size-fits-all solution. Employers will need to take into account OSHA requirements, CDC recommendations, and other federal, state, and local requirements. It will be important that you implement a structure to ensure a high degree of preparedness for every possible scenario to ensure a safe workplace. This may involve developing a strategy and response committee to address decisions such as travel, positive case response, who should be consulted, and who is the final decision maker. You may need to create new protocols and procedures and/or update current policies. You'll want to establish clear communications to employees about new processes and expectations for their return to work. This includes determining when to return your employees and whether to implement a phased return. How will employees be notified and with how much notice? Depending on your size and methods of communication, that may be with text messages, phone calls, or mandatory virtual staff meetings. We suggest you send your employees a letter where they can indicate acceptance of your offer or if they choose to voluntarily resign. The letter should include a statement that all policies and agreements in effect on the date of the layoff or furlough will remain in effect when employees return to work. Contact me if you'd like a sample letter. What will the job look like when employees return? Will they resume full-time or part-time hours? Will they be working remote or in the office? Will they have reduced schedules or staggered shifts? Do you want to have a phased-in approach with just a few employees returning each week? Will they have reduced wages and will there be a change in duties? Determine how to handle other reintegration logistics, such as the return of employer equipment or leased equipment, reimbursement for any reasonable and necessary business expenses incurred, such as the use of a personal cell phone or internet. Will you need to distribute any legally required notices, such as a notice to employee to document a compensation or other change? You may have to establish protocols to address employee challenges, such as lack of child or senior care and employees who may fear returning to work. What about signage and posters? They may need to be posted at all points of entry and other key locations. Will you need to create separate entrance and exit routes throughout the office? If you'd like some posters, contact us. We have posters about stopping the spread of germs, face covering, social distancing, and coping with stress. Consider creating communication and protocols to address what to do in the event of a positive COVID-19 case within the workplace. You may need to consider what your new normal workplace will look like. Employees may have increased expectations of flexibility in their work location and hours of work, and an increased focus on a contact-free workplace. With changes to the economy and workplace, there may be needs for reskilling or redeployment of workers. And finally, there may be a desire to change or add benefits, including in the areas of health and wellness. Our employee benefits risk advisors can help you with those options. Now let's answer some of the questions that we've received these past few days. May we invite only our best employees back to the workplace? Well, it depends. You don't want to discriminate based on age, disability, or workers' comp history. You must have a non-discriminatory reason and objectively measurable basis for deciding whom to call back. That can be based on seniority, productivity, experience, performance reviews, skills, or cross-training. You can also eliminate a position, but remember, if you eliminate the position, you need to eliminate it and not replace it within a few weeks or months. Use extreme care in terminating employees who are on medical or workers' comp leave. A better approach would be to keep them on leave and then evaluate your need for that position when they are ready to return. Can employees refuse to work out of fear of contracting the virus? Well, generally no. OSHA law only permits employees to refuse to work where there is an imminent threat of death or serious injury. Coronavirus does not meet that standard. However, employees over 65 or with serious health conditions might meet the standard, particularly if they interact with the public. If an employee cites a serious health condition as a reason for not wanting to return to work, pursue an interactive process to determine if working from home might be feasible or whether the employee should be excused from returning to work. What if your employee refuses to return to work because they want to continue to collect UI? Well, this happens to be a very common problem right now with our clients. They've started contacting employees and the employees are sharing with them that they don't want to come back to work. They're just going to collect unemployment insurance. The California Department of Employment Development determines an individual's eligibility, not the employer. It is likely in most cases, individuals who have been laid off and later refuse to come back to work or otherwise turn down suitable employment when it's offered will be disqualified from receiving UI. It's important that you always respond promptly and accurately to requests for information from the EDD, including any notice of employment insurance claim filed. Failure to respond to this notice within a timely manner, which is 10 days, waives your right to appeal. This is especially important if you believe that the claimant is ineligible due to a disqualifying event, such as refusing suitable work. You'll find more information about how to report UI fraud on the EDD website. Should you continue to allow employees to work from home after you've reopened? Well, local orders may require you to, but when that's no longer required, you will need to determine if you should continue to allow. If there is not a significant net benefit to your organization, you may not want to allow working from home. It will be virtually impossible to deny working at home as a reasonable accommodation if you allow this practice to continue. It won't be long before employees come up with all kinds of reasons why they have to work from home. If you allow employees to work from home, they should be required to create a specific workspace, and they should send photos of that space so you can evaluate for ergonomic issues. And remember, if you allow employees to work from home, you should have a formal remote work policy. You'll find a sample policy on ThinkHR. Keep in mind that employees who use their personal cell phone and intranet must be given a stipend for business use. I've heard recommendations anywhere from $25, $30 to $45 per month as being a reasonable reimbursement amount. Will we need to onboard returning employees? If they've been furloughed or laid off, there's no onboarding needed, no need to re-enroll in benefits if you kept them covered, no need to complete a new I-9, and of course their sick leave balance will carry forward. Should you monitor the health of employees who return to work? You may want to require employees to complete a COVID-19 symptom checklist before each shift. You can ask about the following symptoms: fever, cough, shortness of breath, chills, repeated shaking with chills, sore throat, loss of smell or taste, headaches, and muscle pain. You may also want to take the employee's temperature when they start work. This must be done in private, and the records must be maintained confidentially. Non-exempt employees will also need to clock in before testing. Or you may also want to consider self-certification of temperatures, for example, having the employees take their temperature at home and calling in the results. May we require employees to wear masks at work? You can require masks for customer-facing employees. If you're going to require employees to wear masks, of course, you must pay for them and provide them. May we pay bonuses to those employees who return to work? Well, if your employees make less than $65,000, they'll make more on UI than returning to work. So you may want to offer a bonus for them to come back to work. But remember that bonus is considered part of their regular rate of pay, and as such, premium pay must be paid for any overtime hours worked. This could be a problem if you're requiring them to remain working for a certain period of time, as that bonus will have to be included in overtime calculations for as long as you pay that bonus. Can you reduce the pay of employees who are called back? Absolutely. The reduction, however, must be announced in advance of the work week in which the reduction applies, and reductions must be consistent to avoid discrimination claims. And finally, there are new CDC guidelines for workers who have been exposed to COVID. Former guidelines said employees must be sent home for 14 days to self-quarantine. The new guidelines say if they remain asymptomatic, they may continue to work provided they take their temperature and complete a symptom check each day before starting work. They should be required to self-monitor and report to the employer any symptoms. They should wear a mask while in a workplace for 14 days from the last exposure. They should practice social distancing in the workplace and work areas and break areas, and restrooms should be cleaned and disinfected regularly. Okay, Nick, back to you.
All right, thank you, Louise. That's excellent information and a lot for our businesses to consider here. So one of the common questions we have been getting, what do I do if workers aren't following social distancing or any other safety protocols that you're implementing?
Well, you'd follow the same procedures you use for any kind of infraction in the workplace. So if they're not following a safety practice, you typically, like anything else, if they weren't using a guard on a machine or they weren't, again, following some kind of safety practice that you had, you would write them up, right? You would maybe first have a conversation with them and let them know and remind them about the practices of social distancing, that if they still continue to not follow that practice, then you would have to start the write-up procedure. And, you know, again, if somebody refuses, they may need to be sent home, or they may be need to be discharged in the worst case scenario.
Okay, thank you. Another question we've been getting, what if an employee has an at-risk individual at home and doesn't want to come to work?
Well, that's going to be, that may be a common situation, and that will require an interactive conversation with that individual, with that employee. You need to determine if you can continue to allow them to work from home. What kind of accommodations can you make for that individual? And again, it'll just be a conversation and an attempt at some kind of accommodation if you're able to do so.
Okay, and then last one before we move on. We have walk-in traffic and my employee is afraid. How do I deal with that?
Well, yes, that is going to be an issue. There is a lot of anxiety out in, you know, the communities. People are stressed. They're anxious. You know, again, it's going to be a conversation with your employee. You want to assure them that you are, you know, before you open the office, you've done a deep clean, that you're going to have safety practices while they're in the office. You're going to provide them with hand sanitizer, with maybe Clorox wipes. You're going to disinfect the kitchen break areas on a regular basis, the bathrooms. You're going to practice safe distancing. So it'll just be a conversation you'll have to have with that employee to reassure them that it will be a safe and healthy workplace for them to return to.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And everybody, we will get to more of questions for Louise. She'll be available at the end of the webinar for a live Q&A. So with that, we're going to hand it over to Michael Shedler, Morris Garritano's loss control analyst, for some important safety guidelines. Michael, take it away.
Good morning. Yes. Welcome to our webinar. I've been in risk management for 45 years, and this COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented. The experts, epidemiologists, scientists, they're still learning about the transmissibility, the severity, other features of this COVID-19. So hopefully this webinar will be very informative on the information we have. Okay, safety guidance resources. The key word on that is guidance. These are from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, FedOSHA, CalOSHA, state and local health departments, and then the new one that came out last week on the Resilience Roadmap. It's a collaborative effort between CalOSHA and the California Department of Public Health. But the key word is guidance. There is no CalOSHA standard, no FedOSHA standard regarding COVID-19. So these advisory programs are just that. They're advisory. They're not any type of law or regulation. Which one should you follow? CalOSHA is state specific for our state. If you have companies that have business in other states that are not state sponsored, they would come under FedOSHA. There's 26 states that have state specific plans. CalOSHA would take precedence over FedOSHA in this state. At the bottom, California Resilience Roadmap. We'll go over that later, but that came out last week, and it's a survey for 18 different businesses. Actually, I completed one for our agency. It's very educational. It gives you a great idea what to, before you open, what to look for in terms of the hazards, exposures, and how to best prevent transmission of the COVID-19. So, employer responsibility. Again, this is FedOSHA, and this is under 5A of the FedOSHA law, free from recognized hazards. That's a catch-all term for FedOSHA. Cal-OSHA, it's under the Injury Illness Prevention Program, and every industry, every business must have an injury illness prevention program. There's 8 different sections. I want to answer further on that question before that was asked to Louise regarding wearing a facial mask or personal protective equipment. Yes, you can require your employees to wear it. If they refuse to wear it, under the 2nd section of the Injury Illness Prevention Program for compliance, there's a section in there on disciplinary action. And that's where employees are required to wear personal protective equipment. So any issues on that, if you have a written IIPP, there should be no problems on having your employees follow the safe practices. So, workplace safety goals. 3 of them that we have. This is from the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And one is prevent and reduce transmission among employees and the public. Transmission of the COVID-19 occurs most commonly through the respiratory droplets, what they call respiratory droplets. And that can be spread by either talking, coughing, sneezing. Any of those actions can cause it to spread. And that's why they have the recommended safe social distance of 6 feet, and also having, I've got one right here, facial mask, because that helps prevent you, if a person has the COVID-19 or is it helps prevent them from spreading it. Second, maintain healthy business operations. This really pertains to the new work environment in terms of rigorous cleaning and disinfection. Now, cleaning does not kill germs. That's why disinfection is included in this recommendation, because only disinfection kills the germs. The third one is maintaining a healthy work environment. Again, maintaining the social distance of 6 feet. Depending on your business, you could have floor markings to remind employees where to maintain a distance of 6 feet, wearing the cloth facial mask. But in the longer term, it's reasonable to assume that regulators are going to redefine what is needed in the workplace for cleanliness standards. So we want to be proactive and be ready for those, because I know we're going to have new regulations on cleaning and disinfection for probably every business. Next slide. Next one, the risk assessment. Okay, it says a detailed risk assessment for and a site specific. So what that really means is you're doing depending on your business, you look at the different factors in terms of hazards or sources of spreading the COVID-19. Do you have a business where customers come in close contact, or employees in close contact with another? What kind of prevention measures do you have in place? Also, your employees themselves, there's risk factors for employees, so you need to make an assessment. If you have employees that are over age 65, have any type of chronic diseases, diabetes, heart conditions, those type of chronic conditions put them at higher risk. So the risk assessment and site specific is important, and you can include that as an addendum to your injury illness prevention program. And I'll go over that later on the last slide. Second, you want to identify a workplace coordinator that's going to be responsible for COVID-19 and their impact at the workplace. Third, this is probably the most important after doing the risk assessment. Coming from safety, training is critical. You can have the best written plan, but if you don't provide the training and your employees do not know or understand what the training is, it's an ineffective program. So the training is very important, and transparent communication to your employees as well. Next, you want to establish a process to check for compliance and to document deficiencies. This would come under your injury illness prevention program. Like I said, there's 8 sections, and the injury illness prevention program has one of those sections in there to make sure that you're checking and documenting your compliance for COVID-19. Next, you want to establish, this is obviously a new process, a process to investigate the COVID-19 cases and alert the local health and identify and isolate close workplace contacts. And then finally, you want to make sure that you update the plan as necessary. So you don't want to just leave it and not review it periodically. You want to update it as to prevent further cases and further spread of the COVID-19. Okay, following on employee training. Again, you want to train on the employees how to limit the spread. What I was talking about earlier on how COVID-19 is spread through respiratory droplets. They can spread it through talking, sneezing, coughing. So you want to make sure that your employees know how to limit the spread. The importance of not coming to work. If an employee has any symptoms, as Louise alluded to earlier, any type of fever, coughing, chills, loss of taste or smell, any of those type of symptoms, you want to make sure that they don't stay at work. When to seek medical attention. I would implement hand washing breaks when you return to work to make sure to remind employees that they wash their hands. And there's the recommendation from the CDC that they wash their hands for at least 20 seconds and thoroughly wash their hands and make sure they do it correctly. The importance of social distancing, again, both at work and off work. It's the 6-foot threshold that the COVID-19 is spread. So the distancing, in addition to having face mask or cloth face covers, is important. And then finally, the proper use of cloth face covers. This would be in your training as well, how to properly use them, make sure that they don them correctly to prevent transmission. Individual controls and screening. They have symptom screenings, what I was talked about earlier, coughing, sneezing, fever, chills, headaches, temperature screening. Now, that's obviously advisory, but you can have your employees take their temperatures before they come to work. And if it's over 100.4, not 104, 100.4, then they're at risk. So you want to, it's up to you, but temperature screening is a very important screening. Before COVID-19, this was considered a medical exam, but now the EEOC has waived that, and their employers are able to do temperature screening. Second, encourage workers who are sick or exhibiting symptoms to stay home. Again, that's self-explanatory now. You don't want to jeopardize your other workers for contracting COVID-19. Again, cover frequent hand washing. If you have hand sanitizers, they need to be 60% alcohol based to be effective. Depending on your workplace, the next one, providing disposable gloves for workers that use cleaners and disinfectants. The next one, we strongly recommends cloth face covers when employees are not required to wear respirators for other hazards and are in the vicinity of others. So you want to, if they're within 6 feet, I would just make it a mandatory requirement they wear the cloth face covers. And then finally, if we can implement refiguring, restricting, or closing common areas to physical distance to move into open areas. And the common areas mean lunchrooms, breaks, any conference rooms. You want to restrict those or close those off. Cleaning and disinfecting protocols. Frequently disinfect common use surfaces, shared equipment. Next one is avoid sharing phones, other work tools, equipment whenever possible. Cleaning restrooms frequently will be part of your plan when employers return to work on how often they're going to be cleaned. You want to have it documented how often they were cleaned on some type of document sheet. Products that are used for COVID-19, you want to make sure they're on an EPA approved list. Provide time for workers to implement cleaning practices before, during, and after shifts. You may want to consider hiring a third-party cleaning company to do the cleaning. And then finally, consider upgrades to improve air filtration and ventilation. So that's it. Physical distancing guidelines. You want to implement in your plan physical distancing guidelines to separate workers a minimum of 6 feet. Next, minimize exposure between workers when you cannot physically distance the employees, such as plexiglass. You've seen the plexiglass, I'm sure at this time in the supermarkets. That's a barrier that you could use to maintain if they cannot maintain the physical distancing. Adjust meetings to ensure physical distancing. Utilize work practices if needed and feasible to limit the number of workers, like staggered. You would act flex time so all employees don't come back to work at once. Utilize work practices where you minimize the amount of employees all at once in the workplace. And then finally, you want to stagger the employee breaks, but have to be in compliance with wage and hour regulations. Then finally, my recommendation is for all businesses to have an infectious disease preparedness and response plan, or a COVID-19 response plan. Now at the top, the reason I put Cal OSHA ATD standard, that's only for employers in the healthcare operations, paramedics, what they're called higher risk. So that wouldn't pertain to employers that are listening to this webinar. But the reason I put it in there is California is the only state, not even Fed OSHA, has this aerosol transmissible disease standard. I've read the entire standard. It's 50 pages. It covers everything, but it's very educational in terms of what's required to protect employees in those higher risk, but it doesn't pertain to you as an employer. Employers that are not covered by that standard is recommended you cover the interim, and again, you see the word interim guidance. That's all it is for businesses and employers to plan and respond to the COVID-19. And this came out in May of this month. So I don't want to alarm you. This is a guidance. It's not required. There's no regulations yet from the Cal OSHA, Fed OSHA. So, but these are good guidance, interim guidance plans to have in place when you do return to work. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. I know that was a lot of information, everybody. But again, as Michael mentioned, all those steps and guidelines is available online at the Resilience Roadmap at covid19.ca.gov/roadmap. We put it in the chat there. It does have itemized 18 different industries with detailed guidance and helpful checklists that can help you walk you through this plan. Also, Michael, I know he's been working really hard. We are putting together a basic template. So those employers that are not, do not have to adhere to the ATD standard, we're working on a template that we'll make available after this webinar so that you all can use as a starting point. So in essence of time, we're gonna continue on. Now we're gonna go on to hand it over to Daniel Gilman. one of our commercial risk advisors, to help explain the workers' compensation executive order recently issued by Governor Newsom, and then also touch on customer liability. So take it away, Daniel.
Thanks, Nick. Good morning. So I will be addressing two different scenarios that we're getting a lot of questions from clients related to their insurance policies. First scenario is, what if an employee gets sick? And then the second scenario is, what if a customer gets sick and alleges that that disease was contracted at your place of business? So in our first scenario, what if an employee gets sick? This one's now straightforward. It's a work comp claim. It's certain, consistent across all employees, all employers. It applies to all carriers in the state with Newsom's executive order last week. So what is the executive order? In the executive order, a disputable presumption any employee working outside their home at your direction who contracts COVID-19 contracted the illness in the course of employment, awarding workers' comp coverage and benefits. Current period of presumption goes back to March 19th. That's the original date of the California stay-at-home order, and it extends out to July 5th. That's 60 days out from the original date of the executive order. The employee must have a positive COVID-19 test or diagnosis from a California physician. A couple things to point out here. Exposure to COVID-19 is not a claim. A positive test or diagnosis is a claim. Also, there's two sides of workers' comp. There's the medical benefit side and the wage benefit side. The executive order outlines that the medical side will pay right away, while the wage benefit side will pay only after other COVID-19 paid sick leave options have been exhausted. Also, call out here in my nice italicized words, disputable. These claims can be disputed just like any work comp claim can be disputed by you and the carrier. But with the presumption here, the burden is on you and the carrier to prove it was not contracted at work, and that's going to be very difficult to do. Also, the current period presumption is March 19th to July 5th. Could it be extended? Maybe. Should you be operating under the assumption that it will be? Probably. This definitely could get extended out further. So in this scenario, what do you need to do? Well, if an employee gets sick, you need to submit the claim to your carrier. Next slide, Sarah. Submit the claim to your carrier and contact our office. Submitting these claims promptly will ensure the employer receives their proper care. It'll reduce the overall claim costs, and if appropriate, it's going to best position the carrier to dispute the presumed validity of these claims. Carriers will be investigating these claims. Many have already created dedicated claims units for these COVID-19 claims, which will operate much like contract tracers. So get the claim turned in right away, get us in the loop right away. We expect these claims to be complicated. Next slide, please. So what's the impact here? First off, it now provides a liability shield. You now have a liability shield as an employer to any illnesses contracted by an employee. That employee's remedy is now the workers' comp system as opposed to trying to engage in litigation. There's also another benefit and incentive here for ill employees to stay home from work. There's a good glass half full perspective here. And yes, you may end up with one workers' comp claim here from a sick employee, but better for that employee to now be encouraged to stay home and you have one as opposed to 6 or 10 or more if that employee continues reporting to work. It also gives you another consideration to work through as you think about returning employees to the workplace. Can this employee continue fulfilling their duties from home? And are you doing everything you reasonably can to protect your employees? And then a big one here is this scenario in the executive order places a tremendous cost burden on the workers' comp system and you, the employers who pay premium into that system. This is going to be costly as claims that were truly contracted at work and claims that maybe not truly contracted at work but just can't be proved otherwise are all equally honored the same. And these COVID-19 claims are completely unexpected to carriers. They did not price this into their rates. They did not price this into the premiums that they were charging you. There's going to be some fallout from this, and it's going to impact both underwriting requirements, and rates and premium. Many of the things Michael talked about, we're expecting carriers to start asking about. Carriers are going to start asking about hand sanitizer, what practices you have in place. Carriers are going to start asking about masks. We're going to start seeing underwriting questions come up. And depending on the industry, timing, we're going to start seeing this impact in premiums. So if you have specific questions about your specific policy and how this may impact you, reach out to your advisor and the two of you can work through the specifics a little bit better. Another scenario here is, what if a customer gets sick and alleges it happened in my place of business? This one's not straightforward. This is developing. There's plenty of unknowns, plenty of questions, no consistency, no certainty. We're just going to go head on into no one knows the answer to this one yet. Because first, there's a legal question to this of, can this allegation be proven with community spread in mind? And even if it can be proven, can you still be held negligent for damages? Now, what if you're following all the guidelines outlined by the CDC and the state? Could you still be held negligent? Another legal question here is, what duty of care do you owe to your customers? A skilled nursing facility owes a higher duty to their customers than, say, a bike shop. Because the other thing here also is a lot of talk in Washington about a federal liability shield to protect businesses from these frivolous lawsuits to help get the economy reopened. Will that get passed? Will that not get passed? How long will it last? What industries will apply to? This is a hot topic that we're keeping a pulse on. Aside from the legal question, then there's the general liability policy question. Was there an occurrence? An occurrence can also be thought of as an accident. Was this actually an accident, or was this a known hazard to the other party that the other party was not diligent enough in protecting themselves? Was that truly your fault, or did they have skin in the game there too? Some policies have communicable disease exclusions. This is unique to each policy. It's not consistent across the board. And even once we get the legal question answered, the question is, what's the carrier's duty to defend? Because even if we have the legal answer of, no, you cannot be held negligent for this, that doesn't preclude someone from still filing a lawsuit against you. Luckily in California, the duty to defend is quite high, and we expect carriers to have to respond to these. But this is a developing area with no definitive answers yet, no definitive guidance, other than the things that you're doing to protect your employees are the same things you should be doing to protect your customers. And that is our best position to protect ourselves against this. So with that, I turn it back over to Nick.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Like Daniel mentioned, there are still a lot of unknowns, and the best defense is really prevention. So all of this that we're reviewing, that you're really looking at protecting your employees, should be considered with your customers and the general public as they come on site. So with that, we're going to spend the rest of our time addressing any questions from the audience. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible, but please keep in mind, you can always reach out to our office, any of our experts right now for additional help. All righty, so first up here, it's probably best off for Louise. Talking about the fear employees may have returning to work, and if that employee has a valid excuse, such as health issues or is high risk, can the employer require a doctor's note?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. If they're asking for accommodation, I think you could ask for a doctor's note. Yes, it's tough right now getting a physician to respond to those requests. It's a tough time for physicians, and it may be difficult for that employee to get the request. But if you have a concern that there may not be a real reason, then yeah, I think asking for a doctor's note is fine.
Okay. All right. So if an employee asks to work remotely and that isn't available, and they refuse to show up for work, then they will they essentially voluntarily resign?
Yes, I would accept that. I mean, I would obviously contact them and have a conversation with them, but then it may be that you will find that a lot of employees just are not going to return to work. And that will be a voluntary resignation. And whether or not they'll be eligible for unemployment insurance, again, will be a conversation between the employee and the Employment Development Department. They may indeed have some other compelling reason that would qualify them. So it's their decision, of course, but you would treat it as a voluntary resignation.
Great, thank you, Louise. Michael, this next one I'm going to ask of you. This person's asking, what if we are essential and have crews working together that just can't practically be 6 feet apart?
What you would do is, if you can't maintain the social distance of 6 feet, you want to make it mandatory that they wear the facial, in this case for construction, the N95 mask. At least that's standard. That's the least required standard, N95 up to N99 mask, face mask. Social distancing on construction sites is difficult to maintain because of the nature of construction. So I would make it mandatory that they wear the facial, the N95 facial mask.
And then Nick, I just have something to add there. I know what other people are doing as well is this is really making them tighten up their crews and also keep their crews severed as much as possible. So not all of our employees can drive from job to job. So if Joe rides with Bill, Joe only rides with Bill. He doesn't jump in anybody else's pickup. It's Joe and Bill. And if it's a 4-man crew, that 4-man crew stays as that 4-man crew. No one else comes into that crew. No one else comes out of that crew. If they're down a man, they're down a man that day. We don't take from one crew and move them over to another crew. So if it happens, maybe we lose one crew to illness instead of all of our crews.
No, that's a great point, Daniel. Doing whatever you can to kind of contain and almost do your own contact tracing, that's going to help you in the long run. So kind of along those lines, Michael, you mentioned training is essential for any safety topics. How do you recommend practically that employers perform their training while adhering to social distancing guidelines?
For the social distancing on training, you want to have an area that's an open area. Try to maintain, and it really depends on how many employees are being trained. You want to maintain the safe distance on the training. If you have a large number of employees, then you might want to have the training done via a PowerPoint or something on the computer and have them review it and then sign it. That would be the other alternative for the social distancing.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's really going to depend on kind of the facility and you have available. If you have a smaller office, maybe consider doing something outdoors where people can maintain their distance. If you used to pass around a pen and paper for employees to sign off, that's not going to fly anymore. So you may just want to have the manager sign people in themselves, or if leverage technology via computer or mobile technology to implement that effective training. So,
Nick, can I add one thing on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
He mentioned pins. Okay. This is something new for all businesses. Any pins what you want to have, if there's pins being used in your business, you want to have a jar that has disinfected pins and a jar that has used pins. So anybody that is using a pin, you want to make sure that they use a disinfected pin and then put it in the used jar. This is something, I know it's new, but this is going to be the standard because pins are used a lot, and you want to, this is the only preventive measure to make sure they're not using shared pins. So any type of pins, have 2 jars, especially if you're a retail business. If you have a display of pins, you want to put them in one jar that says disinfected, and then the other jar that has used pins. And you want to make sure they're disinfected before they put it into the jar. And that would be under the responsibility of the person that's assigned for the COVID-19 workplace safety and health.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. This next one, probably be a tandem between Louise and Michael. Louise, we'll start with you. How do we handle a situation where an employee does test positive? How do we inform other employees or patients that may have been in contact?
Well, you need obviously to protect their identity and maintain confidentiality. But I actually have a sample letter, Nick, that you can use to notify your employees. That'd be happy to share with anybody. That's what I would recommend, that they send their employees a letter. Again, you know, the new CDC guidelines about whether somebody's been, if they've contracted COVID or if they've just been exposed to COVID are two different things. Before, early on, I was recommending to clients that if somebody had been exposed to COVID, that, oh, they send them home and they self-quarantine for 14 days. And of course, that's no longer needed. So I guess it depends on if they've been diagnosed with COVID or exposed to COVID as to what steps you would follow. Michael, do you have any other suggestions?
Just that if an employee is either one of those, the employee never is named. You never name the individual employee. You just tell the other employees that someone's been diagnosed or has contracted COVID-19, but under Cal OSHA laws, never identify who the person is.
Yeah, and HIPAA law as well.
Yeah. All right, thank you both. Okay, Michael, with the situation with workers' comp, if an employee tests positive at the work and it's determined at the workplace, is that reportable by Cal OSHA guidelines?
Yes, it is. You report all COVID-19 cases to Cal OSHA. It's a requirement in the record-keeping requirement. Yes.
Okay, next up, this one's for you, Louise. Let's see, would you mind covering the employer requirements for employees returning back to work from a layoff, not a furlough? We were under the impression that we need to treat that as a new hire, including the W-4 form and all other new hire documents with the exception of the I-9.
Well, you know, I disagree. I don't think it's necessary to recreate the hiring onboarding procedure that's you had in, you know, for brand new employees. You can certainly check in with them and ask them if they want to make any changes to their W-4, if they've had any changes to their emergency contact information, if they want to list a new person for emergency contact. But the I-9 form doesn't need to be completed. If you did reduce their compensation, you will need to give them a new notice to employee. But, you know, having them fill out a new application form and completing all those onboarding documents, I personally don't feel that's necessary for a layoff or furloughed employee.
Okay, thank you, Louise. This one next up, for you, Louise, as well. I have an employee whose spouse is COVID positive, but the employee is not and continuing to work. All precautions are reported as being followed by the employee. Can we request the employee to stay home to prevent either a work comp claim or prevent other employees if in fact they do get sick?
Well, if they get sick, absolutely, you would have them stay at home. But if they have a loved one who's positive for COVID, if the loved one is positive and sick and has symptoms, I would have them self-quarantine. That's a tough one. You know, can they require the person to stay at home? Yeah, you can. You can require an employee to stay at home. Again, with those CDC guidelines, if they're not showing any symptoms, however, you could have them come back but have them wear a mask Have them complete, I'd have them complete that symptoms checklist every morning, have them wear a mask, practice the safe distancing. So it just, you know, again, the setup of the office, how large the office is, how much space do they work in their own office, or are they working in a cubicle? All those situations will need to be evaluated when you make your decision on how to go forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Louise. Okay, we've got one more here. And Michael, this is probably in your wheelhouse. This person's asking, what happens when it gets too hot outside and construction crews are required to wear a mask in the heat? Is there a specific temperature that they may be allowed to remove the mask?
No, no. Even before this COVID-19, no, there's no exemption for that. The temperature, the heat illness prevention plan, all of that, it does not exempt them from wearing that. No.
Okay. Might add, if they do want to remove the mask, just make sure they're socially distancing from others nearby and removing them from any other exposures that required them to wear the respirator in the first place. So. Okay, well that will do it for our Q&A session. We're coming to the end of our time here. So again, if we weren't able to answer your questions today, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We'll also be sending out the recording and slides of this session, as well as posting it on our COVID-19 resource page. So just a couple updates here. This Thursday, we will be hosting our Hospitality and Tourism Industry Roundtable with Collaboration Business Consulting. If you'd like to join that link can also be found on our resource page. We had our first one last week with the winery industry, and I've been hearing really good things about it. So I highly encourage you to keep an eye out for those. Also, we hope you can join us this time, same place next week, when we're going to discuss cyber risk and the increased threat that COVID-19 has created. So in conclusion, I know this was a lot of information, but I hope we were able to provide a glimpse of clarity through this ever-evolving situation. Please remember, we are here to partner with you as your risk advisor through all of this. Don't hesitate to reach out to our office at any time. We understand there's numerous challenges ahead, but all businesses, small and large, have a vital role to play by setting strong examples in the community on how to safely reopen the economy. Now's the time to really collaborate and think of innovative ways to adapt to the changing environment. And with a united approach, with health and safety top of mind, we can come out stronger. So again, thank you all for your time. We truly appreciate you joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.